Madam President.
Senator from Kentucky.
Today, the Senate debates removing the authority of the President to wage war in Iraq. Momentous as such debate might be, it is largely rendered symbolic by the fact that the war in Iraq has been over for more than a decade. Were this body serious about debating the authority of the President to wage war across Africa and the Middle East, we would today be repealing the 2001 authorization for the use of military force. Presidential administrations of both parties have used the 9/11 authorization to justify war in over 20 countries, from Afghanistan to Libya to Syria to Somalia to Yemen. In fact, both parties have essentially argued that the 9/11 AUMF has no temporal or geographic limits at all. Repealing the Iraq War authorization will end no wars and save no lives. The bill before us ignores the pervasive, seemingly limitless 9/11 proclamation. And it seeks instead to repeal the 1991 and 2002 authorization to make war against Saddam Hussein's Iraq, a regime that no longer exists. So we're missing the point here. We're going to repeal the one authorization they no longer use and leave the one in place that authorizes war everywhere all the time. The public is told to celebrate the boldness of the Senate that will today end a war that has been over for over a decade, while ignoring an authorization of war that is really the only pertinent current authorization. Now, it is true that some unreconstructed neoconservatives still advocate for the 2002 authorization to make war against Saddam Hussein's Iraq. But no serious scholars believe that the Iraq War resolution has any bearing at all in a world where the current government of Iraq is an ally, at least ostensibly, of the United States. Even more insensibly, some of these neocon throwbacks argue that a 20-year-old authorization to counter Saddam Hussein's Iraq somehow has something to do with authorizing military force against Iran. It's nonsensical. The very argument is so strained that ordinarily one wouldn't even bother countering such a frivolous case except for the fact that many senators insist on making it. We voted to go to war against Saddam Hussein's Iraq. He's dead and gone. His government's long gone. The new government is an ally. The authorization means absolutely nothing, and yet some people argue on the floor, oh, we have to have this in case we want to attack Iran. Have they ever heard of coming back here and asking for permission? Have they ever heard of saying, we hold this power? It's given to us by the Constitution, and that we should be the ones to bestow the declaration of war to the president. The 2002 AUMF doesn't mention Iran. President Bush's March 2003 speech to the nation announcing his decision to invade Iraq does not mention Iran. And Iran and Iraq were enemies for over 2 decades prior to the invasion. In fact, the House report accompanying the 2002 AUMF refers to Iran, but only as a victim of Saddam Hussein's aggression. Nothing, absolutely nothing in the Iraq War authorization justifies hostilities against Iran. One would think that these brave armchair generals would relish the thought of actually debating a war and putting their vote, their imprimatur, their stamp of approval on their very own war. And yet they want to leave it to a previous generation and have no debate should we decide that we need to go to war with Iran. Instead, this plucky crowd of war advocates wants a permanent authorization of war on the books so as not to be troubled with the tedium of debating new wars or waiting possibly 24 hours for the consent of Congress. It wasn't always so. While Henry Clay was not always the greatest opponent of war, he did find his voice when his son, Henry Jr., was killed in the unnecessary Mexican-American War. In the spring of 1844, after hearing of Henry Jr.'s death at the Battle of Buena Vista, Henry Clay put into words what every founding father had previously explained. he spoke these words in Lexington, Kentucky. A declaration of war is the highest and most awful exercise of sovereignty. The convention, which framed our federal Constitution, had learned from the pages of history that it had been often and greatly abused. It had seen that war had often been commenced amongst the most trifling of pretexts, that such a vast and tremendous power ought not to be confided to the perilous exercise of one single man. The convention, therefore, resolved to guard the war-making power against these great abuses. Whenever called upon to determine upon the solemn question of peace and war, Congress must consider and deliberate and decide upon the motives, objects, and causes of the war. That was Henry Clay in 1844. And yet today, the best the present Congress can muster is to propose to end a war that ended long ago. In fact, we are told precisely that it's okay to repeal this particular authorization because the president isn't really using it. If you ask President Biden if we take away the 9/11 authorization, he'll say, oh, no, we're still using that one in about 20 different countries. So we're going to repeal the one authorization he no longer cares about, and we're going to leave in place one that virtually presidents of both parties have virtually said is unlimited in scope. That wasn't intended to be. If you read the authorization from 9/11, you'll find that it's very specific. But today, don't worry that we might actually rein in presidential authority for war. Don't worry that today's repeal will actually end any current war anywhere. Don't worry. Don't worry about continuing to send our soldiers to the Middle East. Don't worry about continuing to send our soldiers to Somalia and Syria and Iraq. The argument for repeal is that, like most debates in Congress, the victory will be Pyrrhic and ignored, and war will go on. The armament industry spread throughout the United States will continue to prosper. Don't worry, the vote today is easy. The vote today is mere symbolism. I will support that symbolism, but I will not pretend that it is brave or meaningful or that one American soldier's life will be saved. I will support the symbolism because that is all the bravery that this particular Senate considers to be possible. But I won't celebrate today's vote as anything more than symbolism. If there exists any desire to end America's forever wars, Congress should today strike a blow for peace by repealing the 2001 authorization for war. After all, the 9/11 AUMF never intended to authorize worldwide war all the time, everywhere, forever. The wording of the 9/11 AUMF was debated in 2001, a generation ago, and was precisely worded to authorize the president to make war on those who attacked us on 9/11 and those who harbored them. Not a word about making war on associated forces, not a word about making war on their descendants, not a word about making worldwide war on religious extremism. But that's exactly what the 9/11 2001 AUMF has become, a catch-all for permanent war everywhere, all the time. So if anyone in the Senate is really serious about regaining the power to declare war, about informing presidents of both parties that the Constitution exclusively gave the power to declare war to Congress, I offer an amendment today that might actually bring an American soldier home, an amendment that might actually save an American soldier's life, an amendment that sends an actual signal to the president that congressional authority and resolve actually lives and breathes and will resist presidential aggrandizement. Some senators will argue that a vote to repeal the 9/11 military force proclamation for war, but they say, well, we could do it, but only if we simultaneously replace it with another sweeping transfer of war-making power to future presidents. Really? Is there not one defender of Congress's exclusive power to declare war? Is there no one else who will reject the abdication of Congress to constitutional responsibilities? Is there not anyone who will defend the notion that absent a perpetual authorization for war, we could survive on just the Constitution alone? For most of American history, for 225 years, we lived without a perpetual authorization of war. We addressed it as it arose, and Congress voted. Not a generation ago's Congress, the people currently elected would debate on one of the most important debates we ever have, whether to go to war. But most people here will say, no, we need to keep a proclamation from 9/11 that has nothing to do with the world today and nothing to do with the war or the attack on 9/11. We need to keep it in place just in case so we can have troops everywhere. For most of our history, we survived without such a perpetual authorization. The Republic survived under the notion that America is reticent to make war, that we are a merchant nation conscious of the great prosperity economic freedom has brought us and the world, and also conscious of the devastation and famine and brutality and despair of war, but also quite outspoken in our history that America won't be trifled with, that once awakened, once attacked, America can and will bring that mighty economic engine to life, the engine that defeated Hitler, the engine that defeated the Japanese Empire, and the engine that after 9/11 showed that America will not countenance for any reason an attack on our people. Couldn't we live under the Constitution again? Couldn't we show the confidence in our people, in our Congress, in our own individual self-worth to let the world know that we don't want perpetual war, we don't want to be the policemen of the world, we don't want our armies stationed across the globe, but provoke us, attack us, and you will discover that we cherish our freedom and will fight for it. But our fight will be a constitutional one. When America was attacked at Pearl Harbor, the Congress reacted constitutionally within days to declare war. When America was attacked on 9/11, once again Congress acted in a nearly unanimous fashion to declare war. Couldn't we obey the Constitution and declare war when necessary and not keep on the books a perpetual authorization of war? Only by eliminating these perpetual authorizations for war will Congress regain its constitutional prerogative to declare war. One generation should not bind another generation to war. The Congress that voted for the war in 2001 is no longer constituted, and many of those members are no longer even living. Many of our soldiers were not even born when Congress authorized that war. So today, I will offer the U.S. Senate a chance to repeal the 9/11-2001 authorization for war, to reclaim our constitutional power and send a message to the world that we are a nation of peace, that when provoked to war, the gentle giant that is America will respond lawfully according to the Constitution, that when war is absolutely necessary, America will obey the Constitution, which requires us to debate and vote upon war and not hide beneath another generation's deliberations. Today, we should rise above symbolism and repeal the 9/11 authorization for war and show our respect for the Constitution, our fealty to the rule of law, and our sincere desire that peace, not perpetual war, be our legacy.